is actually not anywhere close to a new concept. Cars have been able to be hacked since at least the mid-1990s. I was reading an article from 2600 A Hacker Quarterly in a collection that I bought long time ago. Probably around, I don't know, mid-2000s or so, 2600 A Hacker Odyssey, which is all these different news stories from the magazine put into one volume. And it's really good. It's a really interesting read. Not that you can read all the way through it in one sitting. Lots of information packed in there. It's about the size of a dictionary, and it's huge. But one of the articles was you can hack a Mercedes-Benz with a universal remote, and that was an old article from, again, around the mid-2000s, or rather, the article is from the mid-90s, I should say. Well, GM has fixed and refixed and hopefully permanently fixed the remote link hack for OnStar-equipped vehicles, and it's really not a new concept, hacking into cars this way. In fact, it's only a just recently publicized concept, where the hacking of cars has been going on for a long time. This is nothing new. It's not anywhere close to anything new, actually. The whole idea is quite old. When you think about it, too, what is hacking anyway? And you think that hotwiring a car is technically hacking a car. So it's really not it's using something in a manner that a manufacturer did not intend. So that would be hacking in some definitions. There are different definitions, but that's generally the accepted one, is the use of an object in a way in which the manufacturer did not intend. So you could hotwire a car, and then you're using it in a way the manufacturer never intended, and thus you've hacked the car. Basically, you're physically hacking into the car. So hotwiring a car, hacking a car, it's all the same thing. It's just different methods for getting it done. And that's okay. Research should be done into these things, and it's not bad inherently. The practice itself is not bad inherently. It's just the when and where you do it that starts to matter. Well, GM's OnStar is following Chrysler's Uconnect as a proven hackable telematics service. In GM's case, the hack involved creating a spoof of the OnStar Remote Link smartphone app and then issuing commands to the car, such as remotely unlocking the doors. None involved hacks to the steering or braking controls of the car that was underway. That's for the GM cars. The Chrysler ones, on the other hand, not so much. General Motors quickly issued a fix to its OnStar servers, declared the problem solved, and then learned that iOS devices were still vulnerable. Whoops. GM patched the OnStar app at the end of last week and said that users would need to download a new version via the Apple App Store. The Remote Link app allows the user to remotely lock and unlock his or her car, start the engine, blow the horn, and show its location. Security researcher Sami Kamkar last week showed how he created a $100 device that passes itself off as a safe Wi-Fi hotspot if the owner launches his or her Remote Link app within range of Kamkar's box, originally called OnStar, and it's containing a Raspberry Pi computer and 3 small radios, and the phone can then connect with OnStar and fork over the user's credentials. According to Wired, which worked with Kamkar, Remote Link uses SSL encryption, but didn't verify that it was talking with a genuine OnStar server, which is definitely not a good thing. SSL encryption is, of course, a positive aspect of this. It means that there is some encryption, but then it means that there's not really any verification that you're actually talking to a real OnStar server, hence the OnStar. Kamkar says that he spoke with GM last Wednesday, which is July the 29th at that time, and within a day, Wired published the story. GM issued an initial patch. Kamkar said that he's a good guy trying to point out connected car Internet of Things vulnerabilities, and GM issued a "We take our customers' security seriously" statement, which is not surprising at all. We always see these sorts of things. Anytime there's some sort of big scandal or big debacle with any big corporation or entity or anything like that, they always say, "We take our customers very seriously," or "We were deeply concerned about such and such." There are certain phrases that you can look out for, and that's a whole nother show, but there are certain phrases that you can look out for to tell when a company's being insincere, or maybe they're all using the same PR firm, I don't know, but they'll always use phrases like "we're deeply concerned." Deeply concerned is one of my favorite phrases because it's just so faux, it's so fake when you look at it. Deeply concerned. I am deeply concerned, or deeply really anything. It's just so fake. And you can say, "Oh, I'm deeply concerned about the loss of your cat." And it sounds sort of sincere on the surface of it, but really it's just some auto pen writing out a pseudo handwritten letter that can then be handed out to as a method of condolences to the family. You always get that sort of thing. We're deeply concerned, and we value our customers greatly is another one that I really like because it's so impersonal. That's the sort of thing you get with a big company, and there's nothing really wrong with big companies on its face. There's nothing wrong with inherently wrong with, say, a Walmart or anything like that. It's just that it takes away the personality of the business, really. I mean, Whole Foods, as an example, is a cool place, but it's a chain. There's no getting around that. It's not going to have the same personality and the same vibe that a smaller organic food market might. You're not going to get the same vibe. You're probably not going to see the same people at that store every time you go because people have summer jobs. They're not going to work at Whole Foods full time unless they're a manager or something like that. So you're not going to get that same personal experience that you might with a larger or smaller business, I should say. So larger businesses always are very impersonal, and you'll see phrases like deeply concerned or we value our customers greatly. You'll see phrases like that used very often because it's impersonal, and that's just the nature of it. And that's big business, and they can't afford to address every single person in a very personal way. And that's just the nature of it. Once your customer base becomes huge, you can't really afford, and logistically it's impossible, to address each and every single one of your customers individually. And that's another reason why I prefer smaller businesses, because they can actually afford to address each one of its customers individually. That's the nature of a smaller business, and it's great. Well, Mr. Kamkar spoke with GM last Wednesday, and they came out with a statement saying, "We take our customer security very seriously," and yada, yada. Kamkar said the GM did fix the Android phone problem with a patch to the server software, but not iOS, which is what your iPhone runs. GM agreed and then updated the Remote Link app for Apple devices. GM has halted access to iOS Remote Link, requiring users to download a new version to keep using it. So you have to manually go in and download a new version of the what's the app? It's the OnStar app, but I can't remember what it's called now. The Remote Link app. There we go. They can't just call it the OnStar app. They have to call it the Remote Link app because that's not generic at all. So you have to download the new version of the Remote Link app if you have it for iOS. If you happen to have a GM car that has OnStar on it, you need to now download a brand new version of Remote Link because the last one was quite vulnerable. And for a mere $100 or so, I could build a device that would infiltrate your car quite easily. Chrysler's another problem with the Uconnect software that's I don't think has been fixed yet, or that one's a little bit more dangerous because you can actually break the car. I mean, break the cars and enable the brakes. You can engage the brakes on the vehicle with Uconnect. So very, very dangerous, the Chrysler exploit. And unfortunately, I don't think it's been patched yet because Uconnect is deeply ingrained into the firmware of the vehicle itself. That raises bigger problems too, though, about the morality, perhaps the ethicality, ethics is the better word, the ethics of the Internet of Things. There are a lot of things that are slightly frightening about the Internet of Things that I guess should be pointed out, but are not anything to be terrified about immediately, right? Because people want to make a big deal out of things that really aren't very big deals. Like if we're talking about Uverse or the Uconnector or whatever, Uverse I think is Ubisoft's thing, but the Uconnect or the Remote Link or whatever, all these Internet of Things, people want to make a huge deal out of it because it's a new technology and people are just inherently afraid of new technologies. Nothing surprising there. Well, should we be, though, I guess is the question. Now, the Internet of Things is an interesting concept. What it is each and every one of your devices in your house will be connected to the Internet in some way, or for some purpose, I should say. Okay, as an example, your fridge will aggregate different temperatures from different fridges in your region in order to adjust so you have the optimal temperature in your fridge. Or it'll tell you when you've placed eggs in there when you need to get new ones and all that sort of thing. Your fridge will do that for you in the new Internet of Things era. Your car will warn you when you need to get gas, in a different way than it does already, and it'll tell you about which gas station has the best price, that sort of thing. And there'll be probably a deal with Chevron to ensure that you only go to Chevron or something along those lines. But that's the Internet of Things in a nutshell, is different devices that are connected to the Internet, which otherwise wouldn't be necessarily, but they do this in order to give you a better user experience. At least that's what we're led to believe. Now, is that true? We don't really know yet because Internet of Things hasn't really taken off. We see it in our cars, brand new ones, but not so much in anything else at this time. You can buy very, very expensive devices that'll be connected to the Internet, but other than that, really, we don't see a whole lot. Now, this is also going to call for a need. This is all going to bring up a need for something more that's interesting, which is a new router, because a lot of routers can only handle so many devices efficiently. So then we'll need better routers at some point as well, which will boost router sales and everything. Because usually you only buy like one router every 10 years or so. So that'll be boosting router sales as well, which you don't normally think of. But the Internet of Things is an interesting concept nonetheless. Now, the practicality of it is a little bit questionable. The necessity of it is certainly questionable. After all, as the older folks like to say, we've been living for thousands of years using the old ways. Why bother to change now? Well, because why not, really, I guess, would be the reason. Kind of like transhumanism. People say, well, we've been using the same bodies for thousands of years. Why would we want to get implants and all sorts of different things in our bodies that are different from what God gave us and all these sorts of things? And I would agree with that, but still, it raises an interesting question. What can we replace and keep the person alive? What can we replace with the person still acting optimally? What can we do with our fridges to make sure that they keep our temperatures at an optimal temperature? What can we do with our toasters so they can aggregate temperatures in order to have the perfect toast every time? All sorts of different things. It's interesting. Anyway, it's an interesting debate. Unfortunately, we won't have to deal with it for another few years or so. The Internet of Things is a thing, but it's not really taking over our lives. It's not invading by storm as of yet. There's no blitzkrieg of Internet of Things devices as of yet, anyway. So we'll have to wait on that one. But Internet of Things is an interesting concept nonetheless. Should we be afraid of it? No. But definitely bug fixes should be made. After all, have you had your Chrysler smash into a tree because a hacker got into it? Probably not. If you have, my condolences and my deep concerns are sending out towards you, and we'll send you a compensation package, which has a free trip to Hawaii. But nevertheless, have you had your car hacked into? Chances are probably not. I think of all the different cars that are out there and the intentions that may lie behind hacking a car and what intentions may be behind that, and would anyone really want to do that around here? All sorts of different things. Probably not. And in fact, there's only one confirmed case of this ever having happened. So it's really not anything to worry about as of now. Until this becomes a widespread problem, I wouldn't worry about it too much. And really, the manufacturer will fix this by all resources necessary, because lawsuits will abound if this is not fixed ASAP. That's another thing that has to be understood, is that companies have it in their very best interest to fix these different problems ASAP, so that they're not hit with massive lawsuits for millions of dollars because a car was hacked into and got smashed into a tree because someone hacked into it. You really don't want to have to deal with that. The president's administration is now revealing brand new legislation that's going to rein in global warming, I think, anyway, which raises an interesting idea that perhaps legislation can solve every problem, right? Like, that seems to be the general idea, is that legislation can fix it. Legislation will fix it is always the mindset with pretty much any political ideology, except for very few, like the one that I have, which is very non-intrusive. But it's frightening to think that there's someone out there who really thinks that if we just pass enough laws, we can stop global warming. And it really doesn't work that way. But anyway, according to The Verge, the president's administration has unveiled its plan to curb climate change with some of the stiffest environmental regulations yet. Tomorrow, President Obama will reveal the final rules with targets that are even more aggressive than the draft regulations. The new regulations focus on limiting carbon pollution from power plants across America. Specifically, the 600-plus coal-fired power plants across the country are targeted by the regulations. It's said that the new policies will shut down hundreds of such plants, which are among the largest producers of greenhouse gases. The regulations are also designed to halt the production of new coal power plants and will encourage the development of power plants based on renewable sources. It makes you wonder if anyone's making any money off of these renewable sources. Probably so. It's probably a huge lobbying firm that's behind these renewable sources. But nonetheless, should we be taking this into concern? Well, yeah, sure. Into consideration, I should say. Yeah, sure. I mean, renewable resources are certainly good. We need to be good stewards of the earth. Coal power is not necessarily the most clean thing ever. Are the greenhouse gases causing global warming? That's certainly up for debate. But really, it's not up to the president to make these sorts of decisions, although I doubt it's just the president. It's probably the president and a committee and Congress and all sorts of other things. People like to place blame on one person because that's convenient. People like to place blame on one specific thing because it's convenient, and they refuse to see the bigger picture, which is the problem is the state, not any one person within it. The problem is the entire system, not one guy. Like, if I just vote tomorrow to get Obama out of office, and some other guy comes in who's a Republican like Donald Trump or something, and that's going to fix everything. Really, probably not. In fact, we'd probably be much worse off because we'd go for whatever the guy would say, because the majority of Americans are Republicans anyway, and so we'd be led into a awful scenario of despotism and fascism eventually, and then we'd all be in internment camps, and all sorts of awful things would happen to us, all because we trusted one guy, which is a very bad idea. Don't put your trust in any one person. Really, ever, when it comes to politics, don't trust one person, because one person is certainly going to become another person who will then become very corrupt, especially in politics when there's elections and succession and all sorts of things. Don't want to deal with that. No thanks, man. Well, for some reason, the president's administration and a lot of other people too have this odd idea that legislation can fix problems, that legislation can actually solve much of anything. When in actuality, a lack of legislation tends to solve more problems than not. People, for some reason, are so concerned about the presidency that they're wanting this new concept, which is called strong leadership, which is actually a very old concept, but we keep hearing about it. We want a strong leader to take the place of Obama. Obama is weak. We need a strong leader. Well, really, I would much rather have a weak president than a strong president. By like any day of the week, I'd rather have a weak president than a strong president, because a strong president means more centralized power, and that's exactly what I don't want. A weak president, an unpopular president, is actually a better thing, because more power goes delegated to the people that way, because people view the president as a weak thing and don't respect the office very much, which means then that the power is more in the hands of the people than it would be if you had a strong leader who everyone respected. And I don't want to respect any one big strong leader, because that's a very bad idea. Singular leadership is generally a bad idea, because it leads to dark ages, it leads to poverty, it leads to revolutions of the sort that we don't really want here in this country. It leads to, again, fascism, national socialism, communism, which isn't really communism half the time. It's actually more of a monarchy than anything. It leads to all sorts of different systems that we really don't want. So I don't want a strong leader. I don't want strong leadership. I don't want a ruling Republican Party, and I don't want a ruling Democratic Party. I don't want any rulers, actually. That's what it comes right down to, is I don't want to be told what to do by some guy who's never been in my position before, right? I mean, you think that really the president has any authority to tell me what to do, or a congressman has any authority to tell me what to do? And the funny thing is, actually, they don't. I don't have to follow the direct order of any congressman. You know, the congressman from Tennessee could walk in the door right now and tell me to do something, and I could just say no, because I don't have to do anything. Or the president could walk in, and he's a commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but guess what? I'm not in the military, never have been, never will be, so I don't have to do anything he says. There's not really any authority there to make me do anything. You can't compel me to do anything that I wouldn't do otherwise. I won't. I simply will not follow orders. So I'm not really afraid of the president. I'm not really afraid of Congress. I'm not really afraid of any political entity, because why should I be? There's no power there. There's no authority there. And I understand that. And the more people who understand that, the better off we'll be. The more people who understand that there is no authority there in Congress and in the presidential office and in police power and in military power and all sorts of different powers that we, for some reason, ourselves give authority to because we view it as good. As soon as we realize that we don't need that, we don't want protection, we don't need governmental protection, we don't need foreign invasions, and we don't need police powers, and we don't need any of these things, then we'll be a lot better off, because then we'll actually be able to govern ourselves instead of voluntarily giving up that power to somebody else. And that's a very bad idea. Why would you ever let someone else rule your life? That sounds like kind of a terrible idea, actually. Like, man, you know, I can't be trusted to run my own life. I guess somebody else should do it for me. Why would you ever think that way? What knocked you over the head to think that? People don't want to take responsibility. People want to delegate that to something else. People want to move that authority over somewhere else so that every ill that goes on with the country can be blamed on some other entity. You know, I'm not going to say that it's a fault of the populace being lazy that there's a problem in the market. I'm going to say that it's the president letting in all these immigrants that's causing all these problems. Ooh, man, the immigrants are causing all the problems. You know, always something else. It's never the fault of your average everyday person. It's always something else or someone else. There's always someone else who can take the blame for something I've done. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Americans don't want to take responsibility for the fact that the poor economy is possibly both the fault of the government and the people too. There are a lot of ills going on here that probably could be solved with user action, with user integration. We'll put it that way. There are a lot of problems that could be solved if people actually got up and did something instead of sitting around saying, boy, you know, the economy sure is bad. Well, anyway, national economy doesn't matter too much anyway, anyway, because the local economy is so much more important. And we are seeing a lot of people moving towards that idea that local economy is better. And that's great. We're seeing actual user action when it comes to the local economy as opposed to the national economy, which is great because the national economy is bound to collapse anyway. There really is nothing we can do about that except extend it, put it on more life support and more controls, and hope that we'll all be better off, which really not a very good idea, because then we'll just prolong the suffering. You may as well get it over with and let the dang thing collapse, because it's going to anyway. Why should we wait for it any longer? Why should we sit back and say, well, you know what, just gotta wait for it to collapse? Because it is, and it should. But why try to lengthen that period of time? This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of myself.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Tulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Karen McHugh. The hunt goes on for a cop killer in Memphis, Tennessee.
Officer Sean Bolton was investigating an illegally parked car Saturday night when a passenger apparently opened fire and fled. A citizen used the fallen cop's radio to call for help, but the critically injured officer later died at the hospital.
Fox's Jonathan Seri. Police are looking for 29-year-old Tremaine Wilborn. He's done time for robbery. President Obama proposing even steeper cuts from mainly coal-burning U.S. power plants in an effort at cutting greenhouse gases. Still selling the recently completed nuke deal with Iran, Secretary of State John Kerry back in the Middle East and talking with the Gulf Corporation Council. Even he says he doesn't completely trust the Iranians.
Everybody can hope that perhaps there'll be a turning of the page. But we're preparing for the possibility that they may not happen.
The Gulf States Alliance remains worried about efforts to destabilize the region. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
There's a sort of a, I don't know if grassroots is the right word, but there's a movement going on Facebook that's trying to get some people in front of the federal building on Georgia Avenue. It's called Chattanooga Strong. And the idea is, and it's actually a quite interesting idea, is that we gather a certain amount of people to march in front of the federal building on Georgia Avenue. And if you go on Facebook, you can search for Chattanooga Strong and you can find that, give a lot more details on it there. It's Chattanooga Strong on Facebook, so search for that if you're on Facebook. I know a lot of people aren't. I barely use it. I sort of use it sometimes. Like I check it every day, but I don't really post on it. You know, like I check it to see what other people are doing, but I don't really post on it more than maybe a few times a month, because I just like there's not really a whole lot that I want to share on there, especially because I have family following me on Facebook or friending me on Facebook. There's a bunch of family there, and it's like I don't want them to know my daily activities. My mom doesn't need to know what I do every day. It's just I don't know. It just seems kind of weird. Facebook is kind of weird to me, very intrusive. But anyway, if you look up Chattanooga Strong on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, then you can search for that and you can find out more information about the movement, which is Chattanooga Strong on Facebook. Definitely check that out. It's an open group, actually, so you can join it, no problem. And you can find out more information about it. It's to protest against the inquiry that's being put out against the Navy sailor who used a firearm while the Navy recruitment center was under attack by Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, and he allegedly, of course, drew a firearm and fired upon Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, according to the allegations. And of course, that is kind of a crime under the law, which is the military is delegated under. The military is under this very sort of oppressive rule, which is to be expected. I mean, it's the military, and there's a lot of different regulations against carrying weapons in certain places because the military is very, very, well, regimented would be the right word, but the military is very, actually sort of oppressive in that way, in that everything you do is governed. Everything you do has to be logged and registered somewhere. So the carrying of firearms around a base or whatever would be a problem logistically, because then it has to be logged. Where was this at this time? Where was it at that time? All these things have to be logged. The military is very oppressive that way, which is why I could never ever join, because I hate order. I hate regimentation. I hate people telling me what to do, aside from a select few who I allow to tell me what to do. But I hate being told what to do. And so that's why I would never, ever make it anywhere in the military. If I was drafted, I'd probably get court-martialed almost immediately because I would just refuse to do all these different things. It's like, put on your uniform. I don't think so. I wouldn't even sign the document, because there is a document you have to sign if you get drafted, and you have to swear an oath, and I just wouldn't do it. So that's that would rule me out of military service, I suppose. But those who do, hey man, I couldn't do it. So props to you, because there's no way I would make it more than 10 feet inside the service. I would be kicked out almost immediately for insubordination. I'd be court-martialed and I'd be thrown into military prison for 20 years just because I'm not that sort of guy. I couldn't do it. I might do it in guerrilla warfare. I might be able to handle that a little bit better. But if I was doing my own thing, but if I was being told what to do by some CEO, no thanks, man. Well, the president's administration has revealed very tough rules against climate change. So if we pass some laws, then climate change will stop, I guess is the idea. Well, it's a noble effort, but unfortunately, nature doesn't really follow laws that are passed by man. Whoops. Well, of course, there's a little bit more reasoning behind it than that. There is some logic to it. The idea is that if we pass some regulations about the output of different coal manufacturing facilities, then perhaps we can stop them from creating greenhouse gases in a certain amount, which will then stop global warming. Now, global warming is one of those interesting topics that I'm not really going to get into that much, because it's not really that interesting to me. It's really actually kind of boring, because it's all about, well, there's a certain output every year, and this output is then affecting the stratosphere, and the stratosphere then heats up to a certain temperature, which then causes global warming. And it's really not very interesting to me. It's nature stuff is just I don't like nature stuff. I don't like being outdoors. I don't like being don't like being outdoors. I don't like camping. I don't like hiking. I don't like stepping outside of my house. The most that I'm outside is in between my car and the office and my car and my house and vice versa. And that's it. You know, that's basically the max amount of time that I'm outside in a given day. Unless I'm being forced to go out by my family who says, oh, it'd be a great family event. We'll all go picnicking. Why would I eat outside? That's why we invented houses. But whatever. So I'm not really big into the outside thing. So the temperature could rise to 4,000 degrees outside. And as long as I had air conditioning, I would be fine with it. I really don't care. So I am the problem, I guess, to a lot of the activists. And yeah, there's some good arguments to be made about greenhouse gases, I suppose. And there's good arguments that can be made about limiting our impact on the world. Yeah, sure. I mean, there are people who have to come after us who then have to deal with our nuclear waste being in all of the rivers and our empty and non-spent munitions littering the Afghani countryside. Yeah, I mean, that is kind of a problem. We're killing people who have nothing at all to do with any sort of conflict or any sort of industry. So yeah, that's a problem, and there's not really any denying that. But is passing legislation going to fix it? Well, for some things, yeah. For some things, legislation actually can fix it because businesses are obligated somehow to follow the regulations of the government. But in some ways, nah. Because yeah and nah. In some ways, not so much, because really, there's a loophole for any legislation. You can just ignore it, or you can just pay the fines, or you can really just, there's a lot of different ways to get around legislation. So trying to pass legislation is a nice gesture, but it's really not going to fix much of anything at this point. It's a frivolous effort. Legislation is 9 times out of 10 a frivolous effort, and 9 times out of 10 it's also very oppressive in that it tries to regulate things which really shouldn't be regulated, such as businesses in a larger regard. For instance, if there are damages done by a business, you can sue a business. Actually, it's quite a simple idea. You can actually sue a business if you've been damaged by said business. Caller, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey, I read on your Twitter site that there's a rally going on the 22nd of August at noon.
Yeah,
Chattanooga for Justice to support the commander that fired back.
Right, it's on Facebook too.
That you guys will show up there too, and I'm hoping this is going to catch on nationwide.
Well, nationwide might be a bit of a high hope, but yeah, it's on Facebook too. If you search for Chattanooga Strong on Facebook, you can find it. That's how I found it anyway. So it's all over the internet.
I mean, it's kind of absurd to think that this guy took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and what's he supposed to do it with a purse? I mean, he's the commander. As a matter of fact, Ezekiel even says the watchman has to watch his men, or he's going to be charged with the one that slaughtered them. So he did the right thing, because you don't give up your rights by becoming a member of the military or the police or a radio talk show host. You cannot waive your constitutional rights, period. And people are going, well, you know, it's the law. No, it's not the law. The person that drafted gun-free zones are breaking the law. The Second Amendment doesn't qualify itself. It said no law. Everyone has a right to protect himself and carry a weapon anywhere they so choose, unless it's individual private property, where the property owner could say, no, because I control this property. But anything other than that, you do not give up the constitutional rights by joining a group or organization, period. And he followed the law. He protected his people. And that's, I mean, reading the site, it's a show of sign of solidarity. And I'd like to see 1 million people show up and show the feds that they're out of line, out of control.
Well, there's something else that's worth noting, too, is there's only an inquiry at this point. There's not any charges being filed, so that's a good sign. I can't imagine that there would be.
There will be. Come on, based on this Obama administration, there shouldn't be an inquiry. For what reason? Drop it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not too worried about it, to be quite honest. I mean, I'm glad that there's a show of solidarity, but when it comes to charges being filed, I'm not terribly worried about that, just because of the outcry that they would come.
Not only that, what we should be talking about is why those people cannot defend themselves with arms, especially the Navy. That's in the Constitution, that is tasked to defend this country. It's actually in the Constitution. You know, how in the world could George Bush Sr. tell these people, and that's where it started, you can't defend yourself or your people? Because he's a one world, new order thug that believes in the United Nations and their control of the world and disarming Americans. I want to know how the federal government can get away with telling anyone that they cannot carry a weapon.
Well, how
under
can
the
they?
guise of, oh, we're following state rules and regulations that are also unconstitutional on their in its face.
Well, take it further. How
Would
can
you
the federal?
tolerate it?
How can
Would
the
you
federal
tolerate
government
it,
get away
Russell?
with?
Someone telling you couldn't carry a gun?
Well, yeah, but take it a step further. How can the federal government really get away with telling anyone what to do? I mean, why should we listen to them? Period.
That's the point. The federal government should have no relationship between the individual and themselves. That's the way the Constitution is set up. The
Right.
federal government is only supposed to have a relationship with the states.
Right. I would
So by the
rather
federal
it.
government telling individuals what to do or not to do, they're breaking the law. So this man did not break the law. There should be no inquiry. Maybe in just a minute. The only inquiry should be, and it should take a day, did you fire back at someone that was shooting at your men? Yes. Great. Case closed. And there should be a statement by the Department of Navy that this case is closed. He did an honorable thing. And we are arming all of the commanders at these centers. Because if not, Russell, let me ask you what you would do if you were an Islamic radical Muslim terrorist, knowing that our military is disarmed. Where are you going to shoot?
I wouldn't shoot. I would use bombs. Probably. I would be a much better Muslim terrorist than he was. But
Hey,
fortunately,
where are they going? They're going to these military centers.
yeah. I mean, it
The
makes sense, sort of.
First act of violence from radical Muslim terrorists. 21st act on American soil. And this administration and the Bush administration have been neutered. They're impotent. They can't get it up. They can't grow a set. They're not men.
That's true of any
Only
administration,
when it
though.
comes to attacking patriots, constitutionalists, and Christians, but they certainly grow a set of balls. And they don't even do it themselves. They send their minions in to do it. But I hope 1 million people show up. Thanks, Russ.
Sure. Yeah, I don't really trust the feds with much of anything because there's not really any reason to, right? I mean, think about it. Why should I? The feds have done nothing good in the last 200 something years we've been around now. It doesn't make any sense to trust the feds for really much of any reason. And people say, well, the federal government has done so much good with charity work, and we've donated so much money to all these different organizations, and look at all the foreign aid we give, and all yada. Yeah, couldn't that be done by private organizations? Absolutely. In fact, it would be done by private organizations were it not for the federal government. And so the feds cause way more problems than they solve. And I certainly do not approve of any sort of federal government really at all. See, that's the thing. That's where people get hung up. Is they say, where should it be? You know, the federal government needs to exist for da da da. No, I think the founders are wrong. There shouldn't be one. See, I'm so radical that I actually think the founders were very wrong about having a federal government, period. I think they were also very wrong about having a president. It's, I mean, that was a matter of hot debate at the time, but I think the final decision was the incorrect decision that there was a singular leader, because really there shouldn't be. There should never at any point be a singular leader of a nation, because that always leads to problems. Nations shouldn't really be run by anyone, but especially not a singular individual who everyone answers to. And it sort of is set up that way. I mean, the president doesn't have a whole lot of power anyway. The president doesn't really do much, which is good. But the president is unfortunately looked at as the leader of the country for some odd reason. I don't know why, but it's just unfortunate that we're stuck in this situation where people think that way, that the president is the end-all be-all when it comes to the federal government, and that there should be one anyway. Because I don't trust any aspect of it. I mean, any aspect of it. And yes, that includes every aspect of it. I do not trust anyone who has ever worked for the DOD, the DOJ, the Department of anything, the Department of Homeland Security. I don't trust anyone who has ever gotten credentials from any of those organizations. I can't, because why would I? I'm given no reason to. Well, new telemetry has come in that's suggesting that the drone which was shot down over this gentleman's property was actually a little bit higher than was alleged, according to Ars Technica. The pilot of the drone that was shot down Sunday evening over Kentucky property has now come forward with video that was provided to Ars Technica, seemingly showing that the drone was not nearly as close to the property owner as the property owner made it out to be. However, the federal legal standard for how far into the air a person's private property extends remains in dispute as of now. According to the telemetry provided by David Boggs, the drone pilot, his aircraft was only in flight for barely 2 minutes before it was shot down. The data also shows that it was well over 200 feet above the ground before the fatal shots were fired by Mr. William Meredith, according to the allegations. Mr. Boggs, who's the flyer of the drone, told Ars Technica that this was the maiden voyage of the DJI Phantom 3 and that its intentions were not to snoop on anyone. His aim was simply to fly over a vacationing friend's property a few doors away from Mr. Meredith's property in Hillview, Kentucky, which is south of Louisville. The truth, he says, is that this man lied and he's doubling down, Boggs said. The video speaks for itself. Mr. Meredith, meanwhile, continues to maintain that the drone flew 20 feet over a neighbor's house before ascending down to 60 to 80 feet above him, he says. Or ascending up, I should say. When Ars Technica asked how long he observed the drone before pulling the trigger, he responded by text message saying, "Not long. I watched it come in when it stopped. I took aim and fired." After the shooting, Mr. Meredith was then arrested Sunday evening and charged with felony criminal mischief and wanton endangerment. He was then released the following day and has a court appearance in September. The precise height of the drone may determine whether Meredith was justified in opening fire on the Phantom 3. The best case law on the issue dates back to 1946, long before drones were even technically feasible, and yet still, that year the Supreme Court decided in a case known as United States v. Cosby that a farmer in North Carolina could assert property rights up to 83 feet in the air. Why 83 feet? Who knows? The American military aircraft were flying above his farm, which disturbed his sleep and his chickens. As such, the court found that he was owed compensation. However, the same decision also specifically mentioned a minimum safe altitude of flight at 500 feet, leaving the zone between 83 and 500 feet as a legal gray area. So, as it is now, yes, if the military flies jets over your property and it disturbs you and your sleep and your cattle and causes problems to your income or what have you, yeah, you can actually sue them, and you probably should anyway, because it's really funny to sue the government. But yeah, it's really obnoxious that people don't really take into account property rights very often, because people say, oh, well, property that. And really, your property is yours. You can do on it whatever you so choose. Again, despite what the feds try to tell you, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Now, they might try to stop you, but it's not like you can't do it, because you are able. It's just that you may not be allowed to. Say, that's the problem. People say, you can't do that. Well, I just did. People say, oh, you can't fire a gun inside city limits. Well, I just did. Come arrest me, and then we'll fight this in court, and they'll have it determined that I can fire guns in city property or in city limits, because it's my constitutional right to do so. All these sorts of arguments are made, and it's silly that people think that there's any sort of jurisdiction over your own property. Now, the best way to get away from jurisdiction of any government is to get yourself a land patent. Now, good luck doing that, but if you get it, you don't have to pay property taxes or anything, and the land is yours. You own everything that's on it, and you have total jurisdiction, and it's great. But anyway, in 2015, the Federal Aviation Administration asserted its right to all airspace, although I contest that, saying that the FAA has no right to any airspace. But anyway, the FAA is responsible for the safety and management of U.S. airspace from the ground up. From the ground up, meaning that any airspace above the ground is not yours. It's actually the FAA's, according to the FAA. That's what they claim anyway. So they own, the federal government and any other entity owns everything, essentially. You don't even own your own property, according to them, because you pay property taxes. You're paying rent for something which you already own. Now, people will say, oh, but you have to pay rent for the property which you already own. After all, how will we have fire departments? How will we have police? How will we have roads? Well, that's where sales taxes come in. That's where tariffs come in. There's all sorts of different options. The problem is we spend so much money on such frivolous things. I mean, think about it. Government spending is through the roof, right? I mean, government spending is crazy nowadays. Plus, we spend so much money on military technology that really we shouldn't. And we have a far too large military anyway. But anyway, it's insane how much money is spent by the federal government. It's unfathomable how much money is spent, because really the money isn't actual money anyway. That's the funny thing, is that all this money is spent and it doesn't really matter to them, because they can just get more. Right? I mean, you just get more. You say, oh, we spent $3 trillion this year. Well, we'll print up $3 trillion more to make up for the deficit, right? Or we'll raise taxes slightly this year to make up for the deficit. You see, that's how it works. The money doesn't really matter to them, because they know it's not actually money, and they just know that people accept it because they're told they have to. It doesn't matter to them. That's the fun part. is that if you work in the federal government, hey, who cares, man? Now you're riding high. If you're in Congress, you have basically infinite resources now for the country. The country has essentially infinite resources because we claim that we do. And that's how it works somehow with them. A lawyer pointed out to Ars Technica through an online hunting course that hitting an object at 272 feet with number 8 birdshot is actually feasible, although it's quite questionable. That's what the homeowner claims he did, is he fired on this drone with number 8 birdshot, which is worth noting is very small. Number 8 birdshot is extremely small and not meant for very long ranges, although it can certainly be used for very long ranges. The lawyer also pointed out to Ars Technica through an online hunting course that it is possible. And a few Ars Technica readers pointed out that a diagram assumes a diagram which they have on their website assumes a horizontal shot, not one into the air, questioning whether number 8 birdshot could reach so high into the air. Still, both Mr. Boggs, the pilot, and Mr. Meredith, the homeowner, seem to just want a calm resolution after the entire affair. He says what he needs to do now is just say, my bad, I misjudged it, let's make it right, Boggs said. Previously, Meredith said that he would like to tell the drone operator, saying, I would just like him to get some education on his toy and learn to respect the rights of other people, he said. So it's rights clashing against rights, and it's all up to the facts right now. The facts will determine who is right in this case. And fortunately, it doesn't have a whole lot of impact for us here in Chattanooga because we haven't run into cases of this yet. Although if you live in the Chattanooga area and you see a drone flying over your property and you're quite sure that it's not a government drone, I would ask that that you would contact the flyer of that drone and perhaps ask that he not do it anymore instead of shooting the thing down, because mistakes do happen with drones. People like to jump to violence as an option far too often, especially when they're not going to be affected by it. I mean, why do you think we're in so many conflicts now? Is because people think they're not going to be affected by the conflict. Eventually it'll hit home and then we'll actually be affected by it, and we'll act like it's the worst thing ever and it's never happened to anyone else before. But really, people are so prone to jump to conflict and so prone to jump towards violence, not understanding perhaps what that violence entails, because people think violence is a solution to any problem. There are some people in this area I don't like. Let's bomb them. There are some people in this area who refuse to sell me something. Let's kill them all these sorts of things. And it's really not the best option. Or this person did something I don't like. Those are fighting words and I can punch them, even though that's not at all how they work. It has to be intent to incite anger. But anyway, ridiculous. But anyway, anger and violence are often not the best options, and it's certainly not the most Christian or godly option either, if you want to go in for that. So jumping towards violence, if you see a drone flying over your property, is probably not the best idea, because you're destroying very expensive equipment. And if it had a little American flag on the side and it said FAA, would you still fire on it? No, probably not. Why do we value government property more than we value private property? It should be kind of the other way around. But anyway, it seems quite ridiculous to jump towards violence when really there are much more and much better options out there. So please don't shoot down somebody's drone unless it's an actual direct threat to you. I'm begging you. Well, warrantless cell phone location information tracking is heading towards the Supreme Court. Hopefully they make the right decision. The U.S. Supreme Court is being asked to resolve once and for all whether the authorities, so-called, need a court order under the Fourth Amendment to obtain a suspect's cell site location data records. The case the justices were asked to review on Friday concerns a Florida man who got a life term for several robberies in 2012 when a case built with his mobile phone's location data the police obtained without a warrant. So obtaining information such as that without a warrant is problematic, to say the least. The case has big privacy implications for anybody who carries a mobile phone, according to the government, and that device may be tracked at will without the Fourth Amendment's probable cause standard being met. So hopefully, that's in all caps, hopefully the Supreme Court makes the right decision and doesn't say that the authorities, so-called, can track your cell phones without warrants. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world.